Gilberto, continuando la nostra passeggiata all'interno di questo meraviglioso teatro, siamo finiti qui sui palchetti.
Sì.
E, insomma, mi dà un po' un senso di regalità stare qua, ma secondo te al festival ci sono stati mai re e regine?
Sì, sicuramente. Allora, considera che al Festival di Sanremo sono passati tutti, è passato il mondo, sia sul palco e sia come spettatori. Quindi sia sul palcoscenico, volevo dire, sia come spettatore. Come spettatori i palchi sono solamente 16, quindi sono molto esclusivi e quindi si parla proprio delle persone più importanti. Io mi ricordo ad esempio la regina di Giordania, ma in realtà a Sanremo i veri re e le regine sono i vincitori. Quindi
Giusto.
la prima, Nilla Pizzi, con Grazie dei Fiori.
Come io e te siamo il re e la regina del World Economic Forum.
Esatto, mia regina. E proprio di sovranità parla il terzo Sharp Risk, che è uno degli argomenti, no, del Summit 2020, perché basta guardarsi attorno in realtà. Non ci sono state mai così tanti conflitti dalla fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale, perché parlando di sovranità e di territorialità bisogna intenderla sia geografica, sia culturale e sia digitale. Infatti non ci sono magari, o ce ne sono meno, di guerre universali per le sovranità dei territori fisici, a queste si sovrappongono oggi quelle virtuali, per la sovranità dei dati, per esempio, o per il possesso di nuovi pianeti dello spazio. Questi conflitti attingono anche alle lotte per il potere computazionale quantistico, un parolone, per l'ottenimento di risorse quali dati, informazioni ed intelligence.
Il primo testimone questa sera con noi è Edward Luttwak, economista, politologo e saggista.
This is the World Protection Forum, and it tells us that the reason there is a big problem is because we are dealing with the world. Throughout human history, the number one protection which allowed the survival of Homo sapiens was that Homo sapiens was distributed in many isolated communities, so that whatever disaster happened, it was always a local disaster. And there were many different localities which communicated very little with each other. And that's why the Black Death didn't kill everybody and so. Or whether some natural disaster couldn't kill everybody and so on. Today, we are all connected, interconnected. In case anybody didn't know that, COVID virus educated Homo sapiens that we're all interconnected. So we have that first problem. We have no natural barriers. The age of natural defenses, like England being an island or something like that, is ended. The second problem that we have is that together with the big number of people involved in your security, you're asleep in bed, and while you're sleeping in bed, your security is being endangered by factors, by phenomena, by people you don't know exist. In addition to this question of anonymity and so on, we have, of course, today, the technological factor. And the technological factor is that we have all this great convenience. With that great convenience, we have dependence. Suddenly, there are people, I actually was the eyewitness a few months ago of an event where there was an extremely accomplished, capable, powerful person who dissolved and became a sort of a glob of impotence and inability like a baby because he lost his iPhone. So we have the technological dependence. The problem with that technological dependence is that its own security is subject to unknown phenomena, which can occur at any time. In addition to so-called known dangers, known risks, and risks which are known but hard to calculate. We have, of course, the risks that you don't even know exist. So today, if you talk protection, you have to take into account all three categories, including the risks that you don't know exist. That calls for perhaps a return to rather primitive security methods like redundancy, separation, insulation, and so on. Um, and then, of course, there is the big one. The big one is that global commerce depends on security of access. When somebody goes on Amazon and buys a pair of socks, he has a password. And all those passwords together, there is a universe of passwords. And that universe of passwords is the essential basis of world commerce and finance. The whole of global is based on these so-called PKI. P, like Peter, K, King, I, India. PKI encryption. And PKI encryption is ultimately based on the idea that you cannot try every combination. You know the numbers that if you have, let's say, three little balls, and then you have four balls and five balls, and each of them are different numbers, you get very quickly to the situation where you cannot calculate all of them. And here we have a huge, gigantic problem, and the problem has many faces, but the problem is simply this. The inability to calculate all the possible combinations may end at any time because of the arrival of quantum computing. Quantum. Quantum was the thing that made Albert Einstein very angry, said that God doesn't play with dice. God doesn't play, is not a gambler. So, what is this quantum physics? This is indeterminate, you don't know, etc. And the fact is that today it's possible to use this phenomenon that made Einstein very angry, where you have different, let's say, subatomic particles moving together, even if they're separated by 1,000 miles with no wire between them. So this phenomenon is now being used in order to make computers. And there are 5 or 6 known computers. We don't know what other computers might be assembled because they wouldn't tell us. But the known computers have all kinds of problems. They look strange. They don't look like machines that human beings have made at all. In fact, they look like something that would be Martian and so on. They're strange. They are strange to make, and they are very unstable. Unstable, very difficult to maintain. They are, in other words, very, very, very new. They're like the first motor car. But just like the first motor car, back in 1890, it was a French car, I think, the Dion, something like that. That car was completely unreliable. You could get your horse, jump on your horse, and go. With that car, you didn't know if it was going to work or not, and it was extremely limited. But from the first moment it was born, it was faster than any horse in human history. So that first car, and I forget what it was called, something like it was before the very first car, already was born faster than a horse. And today we have the same thing with quantum computing. The a ordinary, common, and normal quantum computer, which is today not yet stable, not yet practical. It's like that first car. That quantum computer is already so much more powerful than any known computer that it makes encryption, current systems of encryption, completely invalid. PKI encryption. And I'll give you the comparison. The world's most powerful existing digital computer is called Summit. Summit, le sommet, the la cima della montagna, the top of the mountain. Made by IBM for the American Nuclear Research Department, Oak Ridge, Arkansas. And this is able to operate at 200 petaflops per second. Petaflops per second. And it is the most powerful computer in the world. Now, the ordinary quantum computer can do the same multifactoring exercise. Think of it as sort of little circles, 255 circles. The IBM machine, the world's most powerful, requires 10,000 years. So if you're trying to break into the safe of the bank and you have this IBM Summit machine with you, it will take you 10,000 years before you get the right combination and the safe opens. The quantum computer can do it in 1 minute. In 1 minute. Which means that all the PKI in the world is in danger as we speak. The reason why the system hasn't collapsed is because these computers are still unstable. And their instability hasn't yet been controlled. They're like the first cars. If you went to the armies of the world in 1898, whatever it was, 97, and said, give up all your horses because you can have car mobility, and then you give them these cars, they would laugh at you because, of course, high breakdown rates, interruption, and so on. Well, we are in that stage. And the reason why this is terrifically important is because somebody that we don't know may be developing a quantum computer in the basement. I forget the name of the person, but do remember that the world's first computer that could be programmed was developed in Germany during the Second World War by a very nice gentleman who lived with his mother and built a computer in his own house. It was actually a programmable computer. Incidentally, IBM in 1946 bought the technology of this computer from this nice German gentleman who lived with his mother. So if there's somebody in the world who is developing a quantum computer in his mother's house, we don't know about it until suddenly all the encrypted systems in the world collapse. You go on Amazon and your password doesn't work. No password works because all of them have been penetrated. In addition to the person who lives with his mother, there is the People's Republic of China. If the People's Republic of China, which is investing hugely in quantum computer development, if they make the breakthrough, they will not tell us. They will not tell us. So what we have here is the original problem, namely that we no longer live in tiny separated little villages and islands, but we are all one system, now has the potential vulnerability of the globality, which everybody knows about because of the virus. Or the virus, in case they didn't know before, now there is also the bomb that can actually blow the whole system up. Nobody will be hurt. No buildings will collapse. It's just that the very large part of global commerce and finance will come to an end. Now, all of this is to say that if there were a World Protection Forum and we're able to educate people about this threat and the concept, of course, of the threat, then there could be the solution, because quantum encryption doesn't need computers. You don't need a quantum computer to do quantum encryption. You just have to do it. You have to get the pure random numbers, which it can be done using physical processes. However, this whole thing has to be done. And it has to be done that not just 1 minute before the first quantum computer. There are, as you know, there are 6 of them are known by Google, by Amazon, by all the big boys, and a few others, Honeywell. You have to have your system encrypted with pure random before that computer functions. And by the way, the People's Republic of China, Russia, and very likely the United States are now storing, warehousing unencrypted communications. They're storing it, they're intercepting it, keeping it, recording it, even though they cannot decrypt it. Because when the quantum decryption arrives, they'll be able to uncover the whole thing. So even if you then stop, you open the newspaper and you find out there are quantum, so therefore you stop and you switch to quantum encryption, the information up to that minute will be deciphered. And that might give them 99% of what they want. Not what you produced this morning, but what you produced until this morning. So we have here a real need for, quote, a World Protection Forum. This is a world problem for all of us, because let's say that you're a particular company in Zanzibar and you protect yourself. It doesn't help you if everybody else is shut down. So what we have here is actually the reason to have a World Protection Forum. I think that its contribution should be to propagate what I would call a serious methodology. And serious carefully differentiates between known risk categories. Humans have been able to deal with known risk categories at least for 2,500 years or so, because insurance on ships, the ancient ships were exposed to storms, piracy, mechanical breakdown because of water instability. And we know that there was insurance in roads in ancient Greece. We certainly know there was insurance in the Roman Empire. All those ships that brought wheat from Egypt to the port of Rome, Ostia, all of those ships were insured. They were insurance companies. And so that kind of risk the world knows about. What we have to deal with are the risks of things that are not known about. This concept is much easier to explain today because, of course, of the COVID, or the coronavirus. There were 2 risk factors there. Both of them were not known. The first risk factor was that something with the power of diffusion of influenza. Influenza is the world champion disease in terms of diffusion. That this would come in a particularly dangerous form. It happened before, of course, and it happened in the 1919, and now it came back again in the coronavirus. That was a something that, since it happened in 1919, everybody serious in the virological world, in the world of virus, had been thinking about and expecting the possibility of another really bad virus. But what was not known was that a highly advanced country like the People's Republic of China, because of political suppression, would allow this to explode. If the public health authorities of India functioned the same way as the public health authorities functioned in China, we would all be dead. But I myself was present in Bangalore, India, when there was an outbreak of Japanese encephalitis, which has very high lethality. The Indian authorities closed that area immediately. Public health officials closed it immediately, instantly, and no politician. As it happens, I was at the airport in Bangalore, and a big guy comes up and says, I am a member of the Lok Sabha, which is the parliament. I'm a parliamentarian. You have to let me through. And the public health officials didn't even hesitate. He said, no, 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 you go to the end of the queue. So we did not know that the coronavirus, we knew that something like the coronavirus would arrive. What we could not expect is that they would allow it to explode in Wuhan because they refused to cancel party meetings and a picnic for 40,000 people. That was not calculable, that part of the risk. In other words, that you would have something like this and public health authorities not functioning at the level that, let's say, Italian public health authorities were functioning, or French ones, before 1914. There was public health, and the concept with epidemics was insulation. So we have to widen our sense of risk to realize the following. We now have not exactly what is called the unknown unknown. In other words, insuring ships from Alexandria to Rome to Ostia bringing grain 2,000 years ago, that was a known risk calculation. But the unknown risk, what we are dealing with here is the fact that the interactions between world organizations and the elemental risk factors could cause another different category of risk. And in order to calculate that, one has to be willing to confront uncomfortable problems. And one of those problems is really examining how different systems work. As I say, India is not the richest country in the world. It's not the best organized in the world. And it doesn't have the world's highest standards of hygiene. And yet, we have had no infection coming from India. So these are real realities we have to deal with. In regard to quantum computing, again, that political context is very important because if quantum computing arrived the way that original digital programming arrived, then it would not be the same thing. Instead, we can compare it with the very first use of computers, because I told you the first programmable computer was developed in Germany by an individual person living in a house. But the British American one was developed to break the German codes. German submarines were sank because nobody in Germany knew that you could build a machine, the bomb, which was this computational, not programmable computer, just a computation machine that could break the German code. They should have known that. Why should they have known that? Because of the famous security syllogism. I have a system and it's very secure. Therefore, I put all my treasure in that system, all my gold, all my treasure. But because you put all your gold in that system, the other side has the incentive, maximum incentive, to use every possible method and all possible resources to break it. That's the security paradox. And so these are all factors that must be added to what I would consider multidimensional security for a world which has lost the protection of the little hamlet, the little village, the little island. We need to have this sort of multi-factor protection.